I'm Mary Ann Gawain. It's my honor to serve as the president of the League of Women Voters of Monterey County. I perform my duties under the tutelage and mentorship of a fabulous board of a dozen experienced members, and I thank them all. We'll hear from some of them today. I know we'll all learn a lot from today's panel, which was organized by indefatigable Sharon, who's off checking on the panelists. She is in charge of our redistricting committee, and I can say with confidence that Sharon is one of a handful of people who has a firm grasp on the overall perspective of redistricting in our county and the many different entities that are redistricting. If you enjoy this presentation today and know of other people who might want to watch it, you can do so through our website, which you will find at lwvmryco.org. We have other resources there as well, recordings of past Lunch and Learn presentations. So check it out. And our thanks to Bob Evans, who is our web coordinator, helping us today and posting things on our website. If you're watching and you're not yet a league member, we hope you'll consider joining us. The membership fee is very modest, and we're excited that we have, just as part of our youth outreach, instituted a new no-cost membership for students ages 16 to 24. And maybe there's a young person who would like to be part of the movement here. If you are a member and you use social media, please follow us on Facebook. Arlene Guest, whom you'll hear from in a minute, is doing a fabulous job of keeping that Facebook feed very lively and informative. Our November Lunch and Learn will be our first panel on criminal justice reform at the local level. And you'll have an opportunity to submit questions in advance so that we can shape that panel to address matters that are of the most interest and concern to you. Let's see, are there other announcements from committees or board members or anybody?
George Riley here. I'd like to announce the Committee on Natural Resources will meet tomorrow. It's at noon. It's a Zoom meeting. We have a special guest, Mike Clancy, will address the offshore wind power proposal that's located off of Morro Bay in San Luis Obispo County. So anyway, we're looking forward to that, and members are surely invited to check in. And if you don't have the link, email me, please.
Yeah, George, I've seen a preview of that presentation, and it's just, I think it'll be fascinating to people, and people should know that although it's called the Morro Bay Project because that's where the electricity will be piped in, it's the zone, I think, is right off Big Sur, the southern portion of Big Sur. So I recommend that. Super interesting presentation to everybody. Any other announcements? Okay, so we'll start today. Arlene Guest is going to give us some context for the panel by giving us background on redistricting and a league perspective. And then Sharon Miller will introduce the panelists. Dennis, you are fielding questions for us today. Do you have any instructions that you want to give us now about submitting questions?
Yes, if you would like to submit a question, please type it into chat. Thank you.
All right, Arlene, get us started, please.
All right, let me share my screen. As Mary Ann just alluded to, we do have 3 great panelists, and I'm just going to give you a really quick overview of the league perspective and introduce you to our committee. So the members are listed on the left, and we invite anyone who is interested in this topic and would like to join us. We've been meeting since April, but there is still a lot to do. So our purpose is to raise public awareness on this important topic and encourage public participation in the process. Along the way, we've come across some best practices and played with some of the redistricting tools from the national and state leagues. And I'm gonna go right now to the league position. So the National League did a study and created a position on redistricting in 2016. And you can see that it's, they encourage independent citizens commissions to generate the maps, specific timelines, and of course, full disclosure and citizen participation at all levels. Kind of typical league, good thoughts and stuff. The standards that they came up with for their position is kind of arranged in a hierarchical format. So at the top, you see requirements, obviously equal population. And this is the whole reason that we have to do a census every 10 years and then followed by the redistricting. So equal one vote, equal votes and equal representation. So what does substantially equal mean? It means typically less than a 10% deviation from the mean, and hopefully less than that. Geographic contiguity it just means that if you're traveling within a district, you don't want to have to cross the boundary of that district to get to another location in that district. So it's really physical adjacency. And then effective representation of racial and linguistic minorities. And that follows the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which was designed to combat tactics denying minorities the right to an effective vote. And next in the hierarchy are things to strive for whenever possible. So partisan fairness, communities of interest, and a lot of the meetings that the local groups and state groups are holding online or hybrid meetings is to get input from the public about their communities of interest. So for instance, for a school community or a school board, that community of interest might be all the people in a neighborhood that go to the same school. So these can be really anything. And then respect for boundaries of municipalities and counties. In our county, because Salinas is more than 20% of the population, it can't be contained in one district. So that's why the boundaries have to, that we can't meet that criteria, at least for the county redistricting effort. And then you'll see some of the lesser things to strive for: compactness and rejecting the protection of incumbents and preferential treatment for any political party. Another constraint that's not in the league position, but it's just physical geography. So the census every 10 years, the smallest area that is aggregated with data is called a census block. And here you see part of the Monterey, you see the bay in the north, and you see Route 1 going through there. So this is showing the blocks, and over like a New Monterey or Pacific Grove, blocks really are blocks. And in other parts of the county and elsewhere, where things are a little bit more spread out and not so rectangular, the blocks are bigger. Now these blocks are the smallest units, so you can't divide up within a block. And then you've probably heard of census tracts. So these are where they take the blocks and congregate them, and these are what we use for statistical analyses and comparisons from one census to the next on all sorts of economic or other data. And I wanted to show you one little example of gerrymandering. So this is from the Washington Post blog from a few years ago, but it's pretty illustrative of gerrymandering, which you've probably heard a lot about. So if you start with an area that needs to be districted into 5 districts, and let's say it's 60% of one thing, we'll call it blue, and 40% of another thing, we'll call it red. You can divide those very equally in number 1, perfect representation. So we've divided it so there's 3 blue districts or 60%, et cetera. In the next depiction of redistricting, number 2, where you draw horizontal lines across, it's very compact, but it's not really fair. So you end up with 5 blue districts and no representation for red at all. And then in the example on the right, this is what you typically think of when you think of gerrymandering, where the lines go all over. And for instance, on the right side of this, they've packed, oh, pardon, if anyone has a question, feel free to interrupt. They've packed all the blue into those 2 districts on the right. So you get 2 blue districts, but the rest are red. So it's really not proportional to the actual population. In another example, let's say we have a hypothetical council and we need to draw 4 districts. Well, you can imagine if you just draw a line vertically and horizontally, you've got very compact districts, but you have a minority and the minorities are split. So this is called cracking sometimes, where they put minorities into different districts and they're not going to be represented very well. So this is important, not just for the voting and the elections, but throughout the whole time, the next 10 years, where your elected representatives are bringing up issues and passing laws and policies. So it's really important. This is why we encourage people to participate. So in this example, if we take a little bit more care to do the redistricting, in here, the minorities now make up 3/4 of the population in this central district, and they're likely to be represented on this council as 1/4. So at least they will have some representation. And just to give you the whole overall view, we have the state commission. So we have the Citizens Redistricting Commission. The first census they did this was in 2010, following the passage of Prop 11 in 2008. That's at the state level. And if you do want to participate, there's a website here, wedrawthelineca.org. But today we're going to focus on just Monterey County alone. So at the local level, we have 21 different districts or boards that are undergoing redistricting. And they have a variety of deadlines from as soon as December 15th for the 2 county-wide boards, and then March 1st, approximately. Some of them have set their deadlines a little bit sooner to make sure they get it done for the 2 community colleges and 9 different school districts. And then we have 4 cities, and Greenfield is undergoing redistricting for the first time. So they've, up to this point, they have not had districts in their elections. And then we have 4 special districts. So there's a lot to do. They all have community outreach, and we're trying to publicize their meetings when they do so. And we encourage anyone who has, you can zoom in and, participate, and they'd be, I'm sure, happy to have as much participation as we can give them. So with that, I will turn it over to Sharon to introduce our first speaker.
Okay, and I would like to note that you can either Zoom in or attend meetings in person. You can send information by US mail, you can do it by email, you can even do it by phone call. So if you have comments to any of these entities that are doing redistricting, your voice can be heard in one form or other, whatever suits you. And that's what part of what our very distinguished panel today is going to talk to us about. We are really fortunate that we have probably the 3 people who are the most knowledgeable and involved with redistricting in Monterey County. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Jean Gobelet of Lapkoff and Gobelet Demographic Research, Inc. She earned not one, not two, not three, but 4 degrees from Stanford University, including an MA in education and a PhD in sociology demography. And then she spent a year at UC Berkeley as a postdoc fellow in demography. Dr. Gobele is an expert on demographic issues, political redistricting, disparate impact on communities of interest, spatial analysis, GIS, and redistricting software. She has been involved with redistricting in Monterey County since 2000 because she came in after the 2000 census, after the 2010 census, and because she knows this area so well and is well respected. She's been contracted with, or her company has been contracted with, to participate with many of the agencies that are doing redistricting this time. Second, we have Ms. Rosemary Soto, who's not only a management analyst for Monterey County's Administrative Office of Community Engagement and Strategic Advocacy, which is a mouthful, but she has worn many hats throughout the years with the county. Her expertise is in connecting the county administration to community groups. Some of her recent work includes the Monterey County Gang Violence Prevention Initiative, advancement of governing for racial equity in county government, Seaside Youth Violence Prevention Task Force, North Monterey County Community Alliance, and Impact Monterey County. She recently led the county's efforts on trying to get a complete count for the 2020 census, and now has the task of managing the process on redistricting for our very important supervisorial districts. And I will take a little sip of water before I continue with Mr. Timothy Ryan, who has a 25-year career in education. He has a background in science, and he has served as a high school teacher, an assistant principal, a superintendent, a chief business officer, and now is deputy superintendent for Monterey County's Office of Education. One of his many current assignments is managing the redistricting process for MCOE. We thank our panelists for taking time out of their extremely busy schedules to help the League of Women Voters and the community better understand redistricting and our role in it as citizens. We especially appreciate their efforts with the knowledge that census data was released very late this time, and the timeline for drawing the new lines has been virtually cut in half. And now, Dr. Gobele is invited to start her part of the presentation.
Thank you, Sharon. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to tell you a story today, a story from my own experience with redistricting in Monterey County. And this experience is shared with Dr. Shelley Lapkoff, my business partner, whom I met when we were both at the Graduate Department of Demography at UC Berkeley, and then met again when she contacted me about our very first redistricting project together, which was Hartnell College. Since 1990, Shelley and I, with help, have worked with many Monterey County jurisdictions. And in the process, we've learned a whole lot about local governments. We've worked with other jurisdictions outside Monterey County doing redistricting and many other kinds of projects, including school enrollment forecasting. So in Monterey County, we've helped many jurisdictions move from at-large to by district election of governing bodies and to redistrict after each census. And until earlier in the 2010s, we prepared pre-clearance submissions or helped prepare them for the U.S. Department of Justice. And that's a piece of information I'm sharing because it had impact on the county that I'd like to talk about. Here are some of the jurisdictions in Monterey County that we've been working with. I think we're working with all of these now, as well as other jurisdictions, including other school districts. We're also helping a couple of school districts move from at-large to by district election of their trustees. The definition of districting is the process of setting up election districts, one incumbent or one representative per district. And the number of single member districts varies with the type of jurisdiction. It can be as small, even as 3. It can be 5, 7, 9, or even more in a few cases. So the numbers of people on governing boards varies by county and by type of jurisdiction. We have to redistrict after each decennial census, as I said already. Now, we demographers have to have an understanding of the laws that need to be followed in order to make redistricting legal and in compliance with the law. The first most important kind of law concerns the need for population equality. That's the famous one person, one vote procedure. This is in the US Constitution. This is based on one of the amendments. Everyone is entitled to equal representation, regardless of age, nationality, citizenship, and everything else. The Federal Voting Rights Act also is very important. That started in 1965 and has been amended many, many times. But the Federal Voting Rights Act required, and still does, that when there are sufficiently numerous geographically compact members of groups protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act, then there need to be elections by district in order to give the protected groups the opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. You see, I have learned a lot of legal language in the process of all these redistricting projects over the years. Then there are some important Supreme Court decisions. We also have state laws governing elections. The Elections Code is very, very important. The California Education Code for schools is like the Elections Code in some respects when it comes to redistricting. And then the recent California Fair Maps Act of 2019 that requires certain procedures for counties and cities and is optional for other kinds of jurisdictions. And we tell our clients that some of the California Fair Maps Act requirements are perhaps best practice for school districts and special districts not subject to the Fair Maps Act. The specific parts of the Fair Maps Act that are important include redistricting criteria and increased emphasis on public outreach. Very, very significant emphasis that's grown over the years. Now, the pre-clearance requirement of the Section 5 of the Federal Voting Rights Act required community input, the opportunity for community input and public outreach. It required that the process be public. And as a result, in Monterey County, notices have been posted everywhere since at least 2000 that encourages people to be aware of what's happening and the need to participate or the importance of participating. So even though the preclearance requirement, Section 5 of the Federal Voting Rights Act, is no longer in place, we still need to appreciate the fact that it did make Monterey County for almost 30 years do things that are today considered best practices. Now, the history of Monterey County's demographic characteristics has changed. And over time, the county's population growth has slowed. And it's important to recognize that population growth or change is a significant issue in redistricting because housing and population growth are geographically uneven. And this necessitates the decennial revisiting of the election district boundaries to see if they need adjusting to make the populations equal again using the most recent census data. Another very important trend in Monterey County is that the Latinx share of the county's population has grown, not just the total population, but also voting age population and citizen voting age population, which is of course eligible voters, and registered and actual voters. And we use all of these things when we do redistricting in order to be sure we understand the characteristics of any districting draft plan. And there have been a lot of other changes in the county's demographics over the decades. I won't go into those now, but I would like to now focus on the changes in redistricting since 1990. And there has been a move still in a process of many jurisdictions moving to by-district elections. And our first experience was with Hartnell College back in 1990, when it was challenged under the Federal Voting Rights Act and ended up moving from at-large to by-district election of trustees. This is where Shelley Lapkoff and I met and started collaborating. And we're still working hard on the same kinds of projects, as well as many others not associated with redistricting. I already mentioned Section 5 of the Federal Voting Rights Act being not exactly repealed, but lifted under the 2013 Supreme Court decision in Shelby County versus Holder, which ended that requirement, but its legacy lives on in your county. Increasing importance of community input. There is ever more influence on this, especially because of the California Fair Maps Act of 2019. There are new criteria for drawing election districts under the Fair Maps Act, not required for jurisdictions other than counties and cities. But some of the criteria are very important to understand, and they are importantly sequenced in order of importance or priority. When we draw redistricting plans, we have to balance many of the criteria because in some cases it's a zero-sum situation where maximizing one criterion makes it difficult, if not impossible, to use another criterion or criteria. So this is a very, very important and interesting thing that I'll get into a little bit more later. There are the criteria changes that I've mentioned for counties and cities. And these changes under the Fair Maps Act have affected our current redistricting efforts. Another thing that's happened, especially over the last 10 years, is improved coordination with the registrar of voters and to make it easier for them to implement adopted plans. The reason that the registrar of voters is important in this process is that after every new redistricting plan is accepted, adopted, and in order for it to actually be possible for people to get a ballot that's designed properly for them, depending on where they live. And we haven't before now been able to do this kind of close coordination because GIS hasn't been readily available for a lot of the things that are significant. But we started talking to the County Office of Ed people way back in 1990s. So we had collaborated with them, but the use of GIS to do redistricting plans has made it much easier to be sure that if it doesn't matter if the line is here or here, but the precinct boundary is over here, we can just move the line over to the precinct boundary if it doesn't have big population count issues. So the next slide is technological changes since 1990. Now, back in 1990, we had to buy 3-foot by 4-foot paper maps of census tracts, and there are a lot of them. There were a lot of them even then in Monterey County, and we had to get published data tables, and that made it really tough. We didn't have GIS to help us. So we went back and forth from these giant maps to the published data to make sure that we're balancing the populations of proposed districts. Sorry, someone needs to mute himself. By 2000, there was some useful redistricting software, but rather rudimentary. And we again had to buy the population data on CD-ROM. We didn't have citizen voting age population or voter data either back then. But increasingly, well, not quite yet ready for that, in order to go to meetings with citizens advisory committees that Monterey County's been using since 2000 or 2001, and to a certain extent, maybe a little bit before that, we had to print out legislized colored maps to be distributed at live meetings because we didn't have the capability of just PDFing them. That's a big improvement because we spent way too much time at the copy shops. The maps that we showed at public meetings back then were on overhead transparencies, and some of you might remember those. Those were not nearly as good as what we have now. But now everything's electronic, especially in 2021. We have wonderful redistricting software that we use for redistricting, and the public, tools for the public to draw districts themselves online. And Arlene mentioned this or referred to it earlier. We can download the data. We can put everything regarding the redistricting project on websites, and we can PDF maps, and best of all, we can Zoom meetings. So we, like yesterday, could go to 4 different meetings on the same day in different parts of the state. Just a marvel for us. So that's what how technology has changed. Now, here is what we have so far on the current Board of Supervisors boundaries, district boundaries. And we drew these boundaries in 2011 with a lot of work from an advisory committee. And some of these boundaries turned out to be very difficult to establish because of the problem of needing to rebalance populations. But we found that the 2020 census counts showed that the county actually does not have to adjust its district boundaries. The supervisorial district boundaries could stay the same because the deviation from the ideal supervisorial district size was less than 8%, and the presumptive maximum deviation is 10%. We are currently working with the Board of Supervisors Advisory Redistricting Commission, and Rosemary will be telling you more about that shortly. And I think they probably are going to want to try to redraw some of the lines or experiment with it. Now, there have been some questions raised this year about a districting plan that started down at the border with San Luis Obispo County and went clear north up to the border with Santa Cruz County. And this was actually a court-ordered supervisorial districting map. And the way it was drawn with that hook that you're seeing at the top over, so District 3 is extending along the eastern boundary of the county and then over the top to get Castroville into District 3. And the reason I think that the court ordered this kind of configuration, which people have called gerrymandered, was the court, I think, was trying to make District 3 a supervisorial district in which Latinos could elect representatives of their choice. So this was not a plan that the incumbents picked. This was a plan governed by Federal Voting Rights Act requirements. Here's a map of the 2001 supervisorial districts, and the numbers on them are the population counts for 2010 and the deviation amounts on the third row. And here are the current boundaries. And this is a very interesting map because in some ways it's rather elegant, and it's really very similar to the map adopted in 2001. I say it's elegant because it kept all the cities except for Salinas in a single supervisorial district, and the unincorporated communities were not split either. We had to shift some people from District 1 to District 4 last time in order to make District 4 more populous and make the deviations low. So after a lot of work, the Citizens Advisory Committee 10 years ago decided not to change boundaries except in the city of Salinas, and that's still the focus of some attention because, and here's a map that shows how we followed city boundaries 10 years ago. Very elegant and neat. But this boundary for District 1 and District 2, 3, and 4 with District 1 doesn't look very good, and in some cases does not follow major roads. And the reason it was drawn this way was to balance the populations. And I think that the Advisory Redistricting Commission for the supervisors is going to try to clean this up. Sorry, I keep going the wrong way. Oh. I thought I knew how to use Zoom, and here I am. Okay, finally where I need to be. The criteria used under the Fair Maps Act of 2019 lists criteria to be used in order of priority. The first priority is the population equality and respecting the Federal Voting Rights Act. Geographical contiguity, and Arlene mentioned these already, and integrity of communities of interest. Number 3 is especially important because there's more emphasis placed on respecting communities of interest, people who have common issues and common points of view, common interests. And we're not especially to split communities of members of groups protected under the Federal Voting Rights Act. Cities, unincorporated communities, easily understood boundaries, geographical compactness, all are significant. Number 7, no political party criteria to be followed. All of the jurisdictions in Monterey County are nonpartisan, or are supposed to be nonpartisan anyway. And so this is off the table for the redistricting happening in your county. So communities of interest, as I said, are geographical areas, contiguous, connected, not one part here and one part there, where people share these common interests and should be in a single district or be considered when drawing the boundaries. And for starters, if it's the County Board of Supervisors, cities and unincorporated communities are attended to as communities of interest. And then school districts and special district boundaries are relevant, at least for the registrar of voters. The school district boundaries can be important for and will be important for the drawing of the County Board of Education trustee areas. Recognize neighborhoods and areas with similar socioeconomic characteristics. Here is a map showing the current plan for the Board of Supervisors overlaid on school districts. Some of the elementary school district boundaries were used for borders, such as the border between Chular and Spreckles Union, but not a whole lot, because school districts aren't really germane to the county's responsibilities. But when possible, to make it easier for the registrar of voters, we did that. And this line, some people think may look gerrymandered. However, this puts the housing and population on both sides of Highway 68 into one supervisorial district, District 5. And that happens also to be the border, the southeastern border of the former Fort Ord campus. So this squiggly line does make some sense in terms of communities of interest, at least. So there are trade-offs. I already said you really can't optimize all the redistricting criteria simultaneously. You can almost do it, but I've never seen a plan that does it entirely. And our work as demographers is to be objective and to report on what we see as trade-offs when we compare scenarios, any kind of redistricting scenarios, regardless of who drew the maps. And we give impartial, quantitative evaluations. Here are the deadlines, and this is my last slide. For the county supervisors, the deadline is mid-December, and this is the deadline for adopting a new districting plan. For the County Board of Education, it's the end of February, before March 1st, same with all of the school districts. The city of Salinas has quite a bit longer, until April 17th, to adopt a new plan. Special districts even later than that, mid-May. And for school districts moving from at-large to by-district elections, the filing deadline is in time for the registrar of voters to draw the precincts for November 2022 elections. And here is information about our company. We got a neat URL, www.demographers.com. And there are 3 of us in our company with other helpers from time to time. And there are some extra slides, but I won't show them because I know I've talked way too long. And I will stop sharing now so that we can get on with the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I think Rosemary is ready to share with us.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to share what we are doing in Monterey County. I'm gonna go ahead and share I have to say that it has been just such a pleasure to work with Dr. Gobele and her firm. They are just such a wealth of information and understanding. This is my first go around with redistricting, so it is still very new to me. I'm constantly learning, and it's been fun. It's been fun to just try to get my brain to wrap around, the principles of redistricting. Why is it important? What it really is all about. And it's been a challenge, and I if you like learning, it's great to be given such assignments as these. We did have quite an experience with the 2020 census last year. As you're aware, there was a lot of challenges and barriers that we encountered throughout that process. And it was always just nudging at me that the fact that what comes next is redistricting. And if we did not have a complete count, the impact was going to be quite significant. And so the critical importance of that was not lost on me. And I think that the team that worked with me closely on the 2020 census, which included various community-based organizations, nonprofits, grassroots, advocacy groups, we all had that same urgency and understanding of the importance of a complete count. So here we are now working on redistricting, and I'm grateful that the League of Women Voters here in Monterey County has been very, very active and engaged in our redistricting process from the start. I heard from Sharon almost immediately at the beginning of launching this project, and she has been in my inbox or in my texts or my phone calls quite consistently, and I love it. It's been great. I appreciate it. And Sharon actually participated as well in our Redistricting 101 workshop in early July, when we were trying to get the word out and educate our community about what this is, why is it important, and why you should get involved. And I found that education component to our community across the county and in all communities, all racial and ethnic groups really needed to have more information about what this is. And we continue to do that throughout this entire process, and I think we will up until the very end, because that is certainly what will help increase engagement. So what we have done in Monterey County, we started off with recruiting for a commission, to form a commission. In early May, the Board of Supervisors made the decision to go ahead and establish a commission, a 15-member commission, and we have 4 alternates who are on the commission. District 3 is the only district that does not have an alternate appointee, and that is because we did not have enough. There were not enough community residents who stepped up to serve in that capacity for that particular district. And so we want to make sure to change that for 10 years. We want more people from District 3 to come forward. And we know that's possible. And so we're so grateful that 7 out of the 15 commissioners are women. All of the alternate commissioners are women, and there are 4 I mentioned. 33% of the commissioners are Latinos, and they represent the Latino communities, and that is certainly a reflection of what our community is population-wide, throughout the county. 70% of the commissioners are people of color. Again, very much a representation of what are the demographics of our county. The recruitment that was conducted with paid ads, we purchased ads on print media, pretty much all of the print media that circulates in Monterey County, such as the South County Papers, King City Wrestler, and Soledad Bee and Gonzales Tribune, as well as the Monterey Herald and the Monterey County Weekly. And we also have ads on TV and radio. We were very specific about requesting, ad space in between those sports, because we know that a lot of people are watching. We asked for the prime time, then what is the most popular novela that's showing up in Spanish language TV, and we want some ads there, because we know that some of our community members are very much in tune with specific types of shows and specific prime times, and we also ask for the daytime soap operas like General Hospital, for those who are able to tune in and probably have the time to commit to this process. We also, I mentioned earlier, we held a workshop on a Saturday. We wanted to make sure that people were able to tune in, and I'm very grateful for those who participated. I mentioned the League of Women Voters, LULAC Chapter 2055, and the NAACP Monterey Bay chapter. And it caught a lot of views during and after when this was posted on social media. And so I think that we did as much as we possibly could with outreach. We did receive a high number of recipients of applications. I think it was about 62 or 64 applicants, and that was countywide across all the districts. Now, we also launched into the the first phase of the work, which was to gather public testimony on communities of interest. And really, the importance of having this public testimony is critical, because it certainly helps to inform not just this process, but it informs our policymakers on what is it that matters most to our community members. And it really lends itself the opportunity to give power to community in terms of defining what their communities look like, and how their districts should be shaped. So it's a powerful opportunity for community members, and it's a big part of why, to me, it felt like so important that we just continue to tell the community about this. And I'm really glad that we're able to continue to collect and gather testimony on communities of interest. They can do that online. They can send an email. They can also, print and fill out the form that will ask the questions about communities of interest. And some examples of communities of interest are, knowing about, neighbors who have gotten together, who have gathered and advocated for a specific need or a concern that they might have in their communities. For example, if at one point in Gonzales there was no centrally located health clinic, and it was something they absolutely needed. I know that was a need a few years ago, and since then, with their united ask, we're able to secure that. And so that could be a potential testimony that we could hear from the community in Gonzales. And just to serve that as an example, if a particular community has a high number of individuals who have immigrated from a particular region in Monterey County, particular region of a different country. I mean, if they've immigrated from a particular region. One example of that, I'll point again to a South County community in Greenfield. We have many community members who live there are indigenous to the state of Oaxaca in Mexico. And so they speak very specific languages that are indigenous to Oaxaca. And it's important to know that, where that community resides and what is important to them, what are the languages that they speak, or what is it that, what needs do they have? They might have language access needs for very important services in our community, whether it be healthcare services, whether it be information and knowledge about how to register to vote, once they reach that age or they are able to vote. Those types of issues and questions we certainly want to hear about and know about what it is that's important to them in their region. So those are just a couple of examples of communities of interest that we're interested in knowing. We started in September. We went county by county. Our Board of Supervisors felt it was very important that we hold public hearings in each of their districts, in their respective districts. So each set of district commissioners, there are 3 commissioners that represent each district. They hosted a public hearing in their district. We started in September, on September 14th on election day. And so we knew that was a highly competitive date for gathering audience, but we went with it anyway. And we held it in the city of Salinas, in East Salinas, particularly at the Jesse G. Sanchez Elementary School. We had all of our 5 meetings were hybrid, so people were able to attend in person or on Zoom. They were all centrally located, and the sites were centrally located with enough and bus transit stops, very in close proximity. And they were sites that were very well known to the majority of the community members within that district and accessible. So we looked for trusted spaces. Where are the places that people have known or are familiar with, especially when it comes to public community meetings? So that example is Jesse Sanchez. A lot, I don't know if you're aware, but a lot of activities happen there. It's a big site for their food distribution programs. And it's where their board of trustees meet for the LSL school district. And so it's a well-known site within the Salinas community, especially in the east side of Salinas. And then, so that's one example. Others in Castroville, we held it at the Andy Osoño Library, another central location, and in Greenfield at the Greenfield City Hall, another place that is very, very much trusted and accessed by the community at large there. We also provided language access. We are, you know, the laws that govern the process require us to provide language access and interpretation or translation within a 72-hour request, when a request is made within 72 hours of a meeting. I'll tell you, here in Monterey County, we have provided interpretation in Spanish at every meeting and at every public hearing, even without the request. So regardless if it was requested or not, we made it available, and we promoted widely. We promote all of our public hearings and meetings in Spanish as well. And now, of course, if there are other language needs, such as, you know, American Sign Language to provide us access for people with disabilities, we do have that ability as well. And then I mentioned the public testimony. We will continue to receive those, and they can be done online. This is what you'll see when you go to our webpage, our redistricting webpage, and you'll see what it looks like. This is the front. There are several other questions I didn't capture here in this screenshot, but ultimately it does also give you the opportunity to draw your district on this specific tool. This is Survey 123. And we do have a different online mapping tool that is coming. It should be up and running within about another week or so, and it will be a different tool that is going to also assist or give people the opportunity to draw their own maps. And I mentioned that we had these public testimonies that we did receive, just to kind of give you a glimpse of what folks are thinking and what people have asked or have told us so far. And this is just a brief summary. You know, in the city of Salinas is the only local jurisdiction that is split among 4 districts. And so a question came up about that, you know, how and why is that? And a concern that perhaps it is then a violation of the Fair Maps Act when you are splitting a community who is largely made up of the Latino community. Is there a possibility that this split dilutes the Latino voice in other districts because you're splitting that particular city, which is largely populated by the Latino community? And then another in District 2, that district really felt that it was important to keep the district rural as an unincorporated community and not split it so much into other districts. Again, concerned to protect the minority interest of minority groups, as well as you know, limiting the impact of metropolitan areas. In other words, they kind of felt that it takes up too much of the incorporated parts of Salinas. And Castroville being a town, they felt that it was had much more in common with in a incorporated city, an urban community. So they felt that they would be better connected with a district in Salinas. Of course, we run into a few issues there with contiguous, you know, having a map be contiguous and be able to carve out Castroville. So we'll see how that turns out, but it was good to hear what people feel and how they want to be connected. And District 3, we did not have a whole lot of attendance from the public there, but we did hear about the request for a tutorial that would help users know more about how to navigate the online mapping tools. And we're certainly working on making that happen. In District 4, actually District 4 and 5, we heard pretty loud and clear that they felt that their boundaries were fine as they were drawn, as they are currently drawn. And, if there were some tweaks needed, the recommendation was to consider, Market Street in Salinas or Toro Park, and consider those areas to redraw them in or out. I'm not quite sure, but those are very good points. And a concern specific to District 5 was, again, their coastal communities, keep it as coastal as possible. And just by the sheer nature of the geography of that district, and also concerns about there being a possible undercount in population related to COVID, and that certainly might be the case. But as we heard from Jean, we're working with the numbers of the final count from the census, and so that is all we can go by, right? And I'll share finally that we do have, we're working on a timeline. It's a very tight timeline, and we're working as diligently and expeditiously as possible with every aspect of this process. But we also want to be as thorough, transparent, and fair in this process. And what we have, we just had our first joint public hearing with the Board of Supervisors last night, and that recording of that will be available on our redistricting page. So if you missed it, you'll be able to check it out and see more about the purpose of that hearing was to report out the summary of the communities of interest in public hearings. I just gave you a very quick glimpse of what that was, but if you go back and listen to that recording, you'll be able to hear each of the commissioners from those respective districts share out their what they heard, share out their report out to the board. So on October 21st, we are scheduled to launch a second round of series of public hearings for again by district. We'll go back out to each of the districts. We're working really carefully and wanting to see if we could hold them in the same spaces again, because because of the proximity to many of the access points for public transportation or even walkability. We're looking at all of those specific details as well. And of course, making sure that they're in spaces where we could take all of the precautions with COVID, against COVID, so that we want to make sure everybody's still staying safe and healthy. And so stay tuned, please, for those dates and times and locations. Help us spread the word. Stay connected and attend, whether you choose to do that from the comfort of your own home, or if you choose to come in person. If you want to see our smiling faces in person, please, you're welcome to do that. On November 20th, we are scheduled to have our second mandated joint public hearing of the Board of Supervisors with the ARC, which is the Advisory Redistricting Commission. And we will be proposing a draft plan. I know that maybe sometimes people might wonder, well, how many draft plans of maps are you going to submit? And ideally, we would have arrived at consensus with one, or even if you present two draft plans, giving the board a choice. Then that may be how the commission would choose to present a proposal for review and input from the Board of Supervisors. Once we've heard from the Board of Supervisors, and we know what they are feeling, what they're thinking, and any issues that they might have, we also know that it's important to engage our registrar of voters and share with her, Ms. Gina Martinez, the proposed draft plan, because as she moves forward with revising or looking at the precincts, we need to know if there are going to be any pressing issues with the draft plan that we finalize and seek adoption for. And it's helpful to have her input earlier on rather than after the fact. And then what if we run into issues and we have we have issues, we have concerns, and we may be open to litigation, and we want to make sure we cross all our T's and dot all of our I's, right? On December 7th, we anticipate that we will have the final draft plan adopted by the Board of Supervisors. And we anticipate that we should be able to adopt it by resolution. Currently, our maps had been adopted by ordinance in the past. And so we are working on, our legal team is working on making it so that the board can revise that ordinance and allow us to adopt by resolution. Because of the tight timeline, that is the best way for us to go. And it is an option that is allowed, that is given to us by the elections code as well. And then we have a placeholder for December 14th. The deadline is December 15th. We want to be done and completed by December 7th. That is what we're aiming for, but you never know what can happen. So it's good to have a backup plan. And so that's our backup plan, that we'll have the 14th as the final date. And so that's it. I don't want to take up too much time. I know that there's one more panelist, and there's a lot more that you might, and I believe we'll take questions afterwards. Is that right, Sharon? I'm not sure if we're doing that now.
That's correct. Thank you
Okay.
very much, Rosemary. And now we've been waiting for Timothy Ryan. So it's his turn from the County Office of Education. Take it away, Timothy.
Thank you, Sharon. I had not a prepared presentation. I just simply wanted to come and thank everybody and let everyone know, especially this panel, that I work for a strong female superintendent of schools in Monterey County, and she's one of the best superintendents you'll ever find. And I also serve on a cabinet that is the majority, 70% are female. So I'm surrounded by women all day, and then I get to go home and be surrounded by one at night. So thank you for asking me to come in and share the experience that I'm going through. I'm just going to say that my job right now is to work closely with the demographers and connect them with the school districts that are undergoing their redistricting as a result of the census, and also serve as the liaison for the County Board of Education's redistricting. And Sharon, you've been so gracious in helping us get representatives from the League of Women Voters to sit on our advisory commission, which we will meet next Monday night for our first meeting. We met on the night of the 30th because, as some of you know, Assembly Bill 361 was passed in September that allowed for government agencies subject to the Brown Act to extend their ability to use Zoom to conduct their public meetings. But it required a board resolution or excuse me, a commission resolution stating the reasons why. And it was just simply, there were still people who felt comfortable, more comfortable not coming into a public setting just yet. So we passed that on the 30th, and we'll be conducting our first two meetings in a context of both Zoom and in person, because we do have some people who wish to come in and set in a meeting with us in person. So we're going to accommodate that. We'll also accommodate any public that wants to come in and do that. We'll have an overflow if we get an additional group of people. And also people will be able to join via Zoom if they'd like. And then we will go through one meeting for the next 4 Mondays after that. So one on the 18th, one on the 25th, one on the 1st, and then one on the 8th of November. And if by that time we have a map that we can take to our county board, we would do that on November 10th. And then if not, the December 15th date would be the next board meeting we have. So I know that you sent a lot of questions for us, and I think that I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Sharon, to conduct that Q&A session. I think to allow people to get any information they have. So with that said, I'm here for any questions anyone might have. So.
Thank you. And actually, Dennis is going to be handling the questions. So if
Okay.
Dennis Marr would start with the questions, and we're ready to hear.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. These were questions that were sent in previously. If you have questions that were generated from listening to today's presentation, please put them in the chat. First is how do you differentiate communities of interest from political parties when it seems like some of the communities of interests are just aliases for voters of a certain party? And I will just throw that out to any of the panelists.
Jean, go ahead and take that.
Thank you, Tim. It's really hard to detect people's motivations, especially if you're not in a geographical proximity to the populations in question. So I've often thought there might be ulterior motives, but I'm not in a position to understand what they are. And that's why it's good to work with people who are local and may be able to say more or less objectively what they think is going on. But of course, that is a form of hearsay. So it's really, really hard to discern how many people are behind a single comment or how many people are acting with pure hearts or with self-interest. It's very difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah, and I would just add that the best way to combat that problem is to have transparency in your meetings and an inclusiveness that includes all parties. Anybody that wants to come can come and have a say in it. Communities of interest can be a school district. They certainly, people in that community share interest in what's going on in that area. So from being an educational standpoint, that crosses any party lines. We have both parties that are affiliated with our school district. So I think the main thing is just to bring people together in an open setting that's transparent and allow everyone to speak.
That's a good question, and it's not. I don't know that anybody has come forward with any sort of public testimony on communities of interest that could come across or be understood as a politically driven interest. And I think that for the most part, there's an understanding that these are nonpartisan efforts. So again, I think we would be keen to looking at that and evaluating what those testimonies are, and especially when it comes down to drawing the maps, that will certainly be taken into consideration.
Oh, thank you. For those, when you observe the input from the community, can you characterize who's has been most active? Are there particular organizations, or does it seem mostly to come from individuals? And how can we increase the participation of citizens on the redistricting decisions? And I'll throw that out to any of the panelists.
That's always been difficult. I've been to many meetings where there were very few, if any, members of the public in attendance because they're just not interested in that sort of thing, and they think it takes care of itself. And I have to say that I think there's only a subset of the population who is interested in these matters. They have other things on their mind. Many people just want to get bread on the table and children with shoes on to go to school. So I don't know how it can be done. I've just seen so many efforts over the years, especially in Monterey County, to get people involved in redistricting, but it often does not pay off unless people get alarmed, either rightly or wrongly, that something bad is going to happen to them as a result of the redistricting.
I think I could add, I think it's incumbent upon the organization to encourage that participation. As Sharon talked about, I was a vice principal, superintendent, and oftentimes in small rural communities, and anytime there was issues, I always encouraged the person who had the issue to get involved. whether it was through school site council or, get involved on our, in the school board, whatever that is, and then have them participate so they can understand the inner workings of a school district, which is very confusing even for people that have spent 25 years in it. So I think it's up to us and to really to reach out. I know that Sharon was one of the very first people who reached out to me a few months ago to make sure that League of Women Voters was a constituency that could be part of this process. And we actually gave her the contact information for all the districts that were going through this so they could make contact to make sure that was a voice that was heard. But we also have, the Filipino community, we have LULAC, we have, and then individuals from each of the trustee areas. We have one individual from each of the trustee areas that'll be representing on the advisory commission. So it really is incumbent upon the organizations to make sure that they're open and encouraging to people to participate in this process.
Thank you. I'll go on to the next question. What happens if the supervisors or members of other boards reject their advisory redistricting committee's recommendations? Has there ever been any past litigation over this?
Well, for Monterey County, I can say it's a big part of why we are we encourage our commissioners to engage and inform their supervisors. I understand that they are doing that, and just let them know of what is our process. And we do want to come to our Board of Supervisors early on and early enough to be able to take into consideration any issues or concerns or questions or even recommendations they might have on how the final draft plan is shaped. I cannot speak to the history. I don't know if it has ever happened that the board did not approve, and I'll allow Jean to expand on that since she was very much engaged with those historical processes.
Well, I don't remember that happening in Monterey County, but I've seen it happen elsewhere. And the only consequence is if the public doesn't like what the board did, they can not vote for the incumbents next election. That's the only consequence I've seen. I don't think it's a matter for litigation. I don't think it's against the law, especially, well, these days, if it's an advisory redistricting commission, the board can decide whatever it wants, or even but an independent redistricting commission like the state is using, the board or the governing body has to use the plan recommended by the commissioners. Then there's a hybrid where the commission recommends one or two or three plans to the board, and they have to adopt one of those and not go maverick. So the advisory redistricting commissions are the only time that could happen these days. And I have no idea whether any board member is going to want to challenge the recommendations made by the community members.
I don't either.
Thank you. That leads into the next question. Do you have any opinion about whether the local redistricting process should eventually mirror the state commission, in which citizens make the decisions rather than being only advisory?
I would say that the people who are behind that movement haven't really looked at some kinds of districts like special districts, water districts, sanitation districts, where they can't even find people to run for the board, much less come to the board meetings. So I think it depends on the jurisdiction. A huge organization like Los Angeles County Unified School District, that makes a whole lot of sense. But for a small school district in Monterey County, no, it doesn't make sense. And for the special districts, it doesn't make sense to me at least. And because it's so hard to fill board vacancies too. It just doesn't make any sense to expect that the public is going to be involved and willing to make these decisions independently.
I would also caution, who would this independent citizen council answer to? You know, the beauty of having a board do it is they answer to the constituency of voters in the area they represent. If you get independent citizens without any kind of, there's no answering to anybody, who's going to, that would be, I think that would be a little bit more of a problem for me, because there would be no accountability. I like the fact that there's elected officials that are being held accountable by the voters to make these decisions, rather than just people who would come, make a decision, and then leave, and then the people in those areas, the voters, are held restricted by that decision. I know it sounds good on the surface, but I think if you think it through, it might create more problems than it's going to solve. And I'm not a big supporter of politicians and all that. I don't mean that. I like democracy. That's all. I just like it. It works as well as anything.
Yeah. I'll share my perspective. One of the initiatives that I have had the honor of leading in Monterey County is Governing for Racial Equity. And a huge part of that work, one of those core principles is to give community power, you know, to have a transformation in how government operates, and take it from the governmental perspective, even within those who work for government, but more so from the electeds, and give power to the people. So from my perspective, when I first heard of that option, I got really excited. I said, wow, we should really do this. But I did have to take a step back and really look at how this works and what makes most sense for the time we are in right now. And an advisory seemed to make most sense, because not only was I in particular still learning about the redistricting process, but also, Jean, she really pointed out the fact that community engagement and really just community awareness and education on this topic is so low. So at this point in Monterey County, and I really feel we have a lot of work to do to educate and inform our community about this important process. It only happens every 10 years, but yet its impact is so significant. If we end up with districts that don't really allow for that path for more of our communities of color to be well represented, that's something that people should really know about.
Thank you. How many optional maps will get created for presentation to the county or to the Board of Education, or for the smaller school districts and other special districts? This is a question more about what the process is going to look like at the end.
I'll let Jean take it. Yeah. Well, I'm going to let Jean take it after I'm done. What I'll tell you is, for us, the board is really looking for this advisory committee to come with a map, and there's your citizen input. Is the board is looking to them to get together, discuss it with all the different interests that we have. I think we have 12 members on this committee, and to bring them a map that they can all look at and say, this serves all constituents in Monterey County the best. And as far as how it's going to be done, it's going to probably be done on a case-by-case basis. Each district is going to view it differently. And I can only speak right now for the county board, is they're looking for this advisory commission to bring them a map. They want that kind of input.
I would have to say your crystal ball is as good as mine for getting an idea of how many plans there will be put on the table. I've seen, well, one of our clients in Southern California school district had dozens of maps, dozens of draft maps. And this happens from time to time everywhere. And in some cases, they just are happy to move a line just a little bit. And so it's not predictable in my experience how many draft maps there will be.
there'll be several that the advisory commission, I mean, that's where the work is done. The sausage will be made in those advisory commission meetings where
Yeah.
you'll see a lot of different potential maps. I think what this board is looking for is an advisory commission to do all that and then bring them, a strong suggestion on it. And they may offer some alternatives as well, but I do believe that Gene's right. It depends on the district or the organization. So.
Oh, thank you. Let's see, this question, how will the lines drawn by the state and the county impact the smaller local districts that have later deadlines? Does anybody have any comment about that?
I would say that it's the registrar of voters that worries about things like that. We don't, as a rule, or I can't remember if we ever tried to match the boundaries of the school district's trustee areas to the state senate districts or congressional district boundaries. That would require a lot of extra work and might not reflect the will of the people, actually. But it's really a headache for the registrar and elections office. So I think that maybe some people think it would be a good idea, but I think it might be exceedingly difficult. We only got the official redistricting population counts in late September, and here we are mid-October, not quite mid-October, already starting to draw plans, but we have to finish, in the case of the supervisors, essentially in November. And where's the time to do all of that kind of fine tuning? And I don't think that the boundaries for the congressional districts and state legislative districts are going to be finished, adopted by then anyway.
And to dovetail on that, we have districts. We have two. We have one in South County and one up here that actually cross county lines, and so those are joint school districts. And so we couldn't really, because if you have kids that are 3 miles across the county line, but they're only 5 miles to the school district, and even in the school, in their county, they'd have to drive 30 miles to get to their nearest school. We have to still have that flexibility at the local level to adjust to meet those needs.
Thank you.
Dennis, I wonder if maybe we can take some of the questions from the chat. Would you think it might be time to do that?
Let's see, we have one more written question and then we will go to the chat.
Thank you.
Let's see, the California Fair Maps Act of 2019 only applies to counties and cities. Is there some reason that they decided not to apply it to special districts?
I believe there was some pushback from special districts and school districts because, as I said, it's sometimes really difficult to get people to fill a board vacancy or to run for election and to come to any meetings. So I think the people who backed, and there are people who back the idea of everyone having to follow the Fair Maps Act, is impractical. It just, as I've said already in an earlier answer, it just don't think it would work.
Thank
Maybe
you.
Maybe I'm overly pessimistic, but it just seems to me that people who write laws sometimes should be down at the grassroots level to see how difficult or simple it is to observe those laws and rules.
Okay, thank you. Going to the chat, we had two comments basically about that sometimes at these outreach meetings, there's only a couple of loud voices there of people who are really interested in getting their viewpoints across, and how much weight is given to input, and that was somewhat discussed in your previous comments. One the actual next question is there some place where citizens can go to see what all of these different maps are going to look like overlaying school districts and special districts, city elections, county elections. We have all of these different entities and all these different maps. Is there one place where we could go to see them all in one place?
Maps like that are very, very busy and hard to read. It's difficult to put two maps side by side and compare them, but it's even harder if all the different layers of jurisdictions are piled on top of each other. I know the County Registrar of Voters has some maps that overlay the boundaries on precincts, but I don't know of anywhere you can actually see them all compared with each other in a easily understood way.
Rosemary, any comment from the county?
No, I don't have anything to add.
In some cases, you need to go to the individual jurisdictions redistricting website and see what they're doing, and then some other jurisdictions website to see what they're doing, and so forth. And by the way, the Fair Maps Act requires cities and counties to have the redistricting website up for the next 10 years until the next round of redistricting. So that's an interesting thing you might like to know about.
Thank you. This, Sharon, exhausts all of our questions. I will throw it back to you.
Well, that was wonderful. And I see something in the chat that says great presentations and Q&A. Thanks. And those would be my very words. So thank you very much, everyone who is in attendance and is interested in this topic. And thank you so much for a wonderful panel and your explanations and answers to questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking us to be on your panel.
Okay.
Thank you. It was great, highly informative. We have lots to process. Thank you for your good work. And I hope to see everyone next month when we will talk about criminal justice reform, another panel presentation. Sure to be very interesting. Thank you.